Hi, this is Dave, and before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.
I still collect all of the Star Wars Hallmark keepsake ornaments. So our Christmas tree is all Star Wars.
Hello there! This is Dave and you're listening to What Does Star Wars Mean to You? The show where we talk to all kinds of fans of Star Wars. From industry insiders to indie artists, from mega collectors to obsessive mythologists, to find out how Star Wars impacted their life. Here's the thing, there's a lot of ways to look at Star Wars and it's all from a certain point of view. And that point of view is yours. Now, I've always loved hearing people's passionate points of view on Star Wars because, for me, it reveals new ways of looking at the franchise. Also, let's just face it, it's fun to talk Star Wars. Today, my guest works with the Lego Group on all of your favorite IPs, which means if there's a movie or show, for example, like Ghostbusters, Jurassic Park, or DC, or anything that collaborates with Lego, he's helping to make that happen. He's worked on events and themed entertainment with such brands as Disney, Marvel, and Lionsgate. He's a massive Star Wars fan who came to the franchise through the re-release of the OT, but grew up with the PT. He's such a big fan that he had a Star Wars-themed wedding, and if that sounds familiar, it's because his wife, Jennifer, has shared what Star Wars means to her on this show, and attributed her own reignited fandom for the franchise to being with him. Please give a warm hello there to Ryan Gallego.
Hello there. Hi. Thanks. I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining me and sharing with the world what Star Wars means to you. Are you ready for this?
Absolutely. If it's Star Wars, I'm always ready for it.
Red 5 standing by. So I like to start with a thing I call 5 with the Force. This is a standard set of 5 questions for all my guests. And we'll just start with question number 1. Super easy. Which Star Wars movie is your go-to favorite?
Oh, you say that it's a super easy question, but it's actually a little bit harder. But I would probably have to say A New Hope. And part of the reasoning, originally it was Empire Strikes Back for so long. But, after rewatching A New Hope over and over and, watching it with my wife and watching it with my, other family members, it just was that movie that sparked the hope for everything. And I think Rogue One coming out also kind of gave a little bit of that. So, going back in and rewatching over and over, A New Hope really kind of became the crux of my favorite film of the franchise. So I know it's the original, but it's the best.
I apologize for this pun, but Rogue One fits into A New Hope like a Lego piece. It's just,
yes,
the look and feel of it is so kind of classic Star Wars A New Hope. For this next question, I have to roll a 1d6, and let's see, what do we got here?
Okay.
We got 1. I think this is a good one.
Oh, all right.
Who is your favorite major character?
I've always been a massive Darth Vader fan. I have a Darth Vader tattoo.
Oh, wow.
I've just always been in love with
evil.
The awe. Yeah, exactly. Evil. The awe that Darth Vader brings to the screen. And in reality, you could say the entire Star Wars saga is about him.
Yeah.
So, he's always just been my classic, my go-to. And got to do it for the Sith.
Well, of all the major characters, he is one of the most majors. And I find it kind of interesting because he's also a lot of fans who come on with the OT. Darth Vader tends to be the major character that they're aligned with. Okay, question number 3. What is your favorite line to quote?
So the line that I don't necessarily always quote because I don't always truly follow it, but I had it on my license plate frame for a long time. And it was one that I was always just kind of like, that's actually a really good quote. And it's, something that people could live by was do or do not. There is no try.
Yes.
Very classic, but you always say, oh, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. And then when people say, oh, but do or do not. And you're like, okay, all right, I get you. I see you.
Do you think that's like the Marco Polo for Star Wars fans? If you go do or do not, if someone yells out, there is no try, there's a fan there.
Absolutely. I expect it anytime I'm in a crowd. So you know what? I'm going to try that at my next event I'm going to go to in a couple weeks.
Yeah. I encourage you. If you can record it and send it my way, I'll put it up on the socials of you at the mic.
Right.
I don't know what your event is, but if you're on a mic, I'd love to see it.
Cool. All right, I'll give it a shot.
Let's see. Question number 4. Can you do any Star Wars impressions or impersonations?
Ooh, you always try, and most people always try either Chewie or R2. When I was a little kid, I used to love going Houdini as the little fellas, or everybody always oh.
Yes, that's
Jabba. But it's always fun to do the noises versus maybe some certain quotes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what my brother and I would do, and I think most people did when they were kids as well, as obviously the lightsaber sounds when you're trying to battle with broomsticks or things like that. So
and then my final question, besides the movies, what is your favorite Star Wars content? This could be a TV show, a comic book, a novel, a game.
Oh, this is tough because I try to pull in as much Star Wars content as I possibly can. And I've actually felt like I've failed a little bit this year because I still have not played Jedi Survivor. Frankly, I don't have a PS5, so I just haven't had the chance, and I've been a little busy.
Right. I don't have one either. It's like, come out for the PS4 or
exactly
a lesser console system. You don't have to. I don't need to be so far into the future. I just want to play.
Right. But I would probably say actually there's some really good Star Wars comics that have been coming out from Marvel recently. I love that Black Chrysanthemum, debuted in Book of Boba Fett. I'm just waiting for them to do live action Dr. Aphra.
Yeah.
But some of that content, feeding time between A New Hope and Empire, and currently between Empire and Return of the Jedi, has been really awesome. And it all kind of fits in, but they're not beholden to anything. So there's some really good comic book content that I've been following lately.
I really enjoyed Greg Pak's run on Darth Vader. The 2020 good. Run. Oh my gosh. He is
the moment when he finds out that he has a son.
Yes.
And the Emperor has kind of been lying to him the entire time. It was just sorry, spoiler alert.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
I think that was issue 1 and we're on like issue 35. So I think fair.
Exactly. So that was a really cool, and even visually that was a really amazing piece that was done in that book.
I appreciate how the Darth Vader comics really kind of just as Clone Wars explores Anakin about to become Vader, the Darth Vader comics kind of explore what it's like to be Anakin under the armor.
Yeah, I think it's really unique too because they're getting an opportunity to pull back some of those layers, and I think that might have given a little, fingers crossed, might have given a little inspiration for Obi-Wan, that we're seeing a little bit of the Anakin underneath. But yeah, I agree. I think that's an amazing part of the storytelling of Vader.
Now, you said, before we get into kind of your Star Wars journey, you said you have a Darth Vader tattoo. Can I ask what it is of? Like, is it his mask, his saber, and where is it?
Yeah, it's on my shoulder, on my left shoulder. I would show you, but then I'd have to take my entire shirt off.
I'll
It's
wait.
part of yeah, it's part of his helmet. It was actually the very first tattoo that I ever got, and I got it when I turned 18. And it was one of those where it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna put it up on my shoulder, so my parents aren't really gonna see it if
Yeah.
I don't show them, and you know what, I'm gonna make it a little bit kind of interesting looking, so it's not just a straight Darth Vader's helmet.
Yep.
So it's kind of a little bit, it looks a little bit of like the shadow of his helmet.
Oh, nice.
So it's kind of cool. I really enjoy it. And that's just the beginning of my sleeve, my half sleeve.
Nice. Now, so you were 18 when you got this Darth Vader tattoo. So obviously, by the time you're 18, you're a giant Star Wars fan. When's the first
Oh
time
yeah.
you saw the special editions? That was like your on ramp to the Star Wars fandom.
Yep. Yep.
Take me through the first time, like leading up to seeing it in the theaters. I'm assuming it was in the theaters for the first time.
The first time fully and with all three, yes. But I'll go back slightly before that.
Yeah.
My first viewing was actually, I started with Empire Strike Back, interestingly, and I was slightly younger, and we were at a friend's house, and my cousin was like, oh, she was massively into Star Wars at the time, and she was like, oh, I gotta show you this, and she had a VHS, the original version, and put in Empire Strikes Back, and I don't quite remember a ton of it, but I just remember like seeing this incredible battle on Hoth and seeing Luke get his hand chopped off, and there was just so much emotion in the film, and I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. I like it. And then that's when Kenner started coming back out with the action figures, a little bit more buff versions of the action figures, and and then you got the power of the Force and a lot of that kind of stuff. So I started kind of collecting action figures before I had seen the entire trilogy. So I kind of learned through some of these characters, and then in '97 when they were like, all right, we're re-releasing Star Wars.
If you don't mind, how old were you when you started collecting the action figures?
Let's see. They came out, I believe, in '95, right?
Yeah.
So I was about 10 or 11 years old.
Wow.
Prime age for great action figures.
I was I guess a little more than 10 years older than you, because I was a junior in college when they came out.
Okay. All right.
Now,
so was that a little bit more like, well, these aren't the action figures that I remember, and
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It was because they were bigger and bulkier. So you started collecting the action figures, and then it's announced that the re-release is coming to theaters. Were you really excited for this?
Oh yeah. So when it was announced, the interesting thing is that each movie was going to come out in the first 3 months of the year. So it was like, A New Hope was in January, Empire Strikes Back was in February, and Return of the Jedi was in March. And my birthday is at the very, very beginning of February. So it was kind of like, all right, cool. Let's actually go see A New Hope for my birthday, because Empire wouldn't have come out yet. It was probably the first time that I had kind of a big, like, I could invite a whole bunch of friends and we're all going to go to the movie theaters, and it was going to be just this big, huge thing. And my brother was into Star Wars as well, not as much as I was, but because it was my birthday, he was coming along, but he got to invite one friend, and we all went. And I just remember being so excited to see Star Wars in theaters.
Yeah.
Because, at that point I had only seen, on VHS or things, not fully, and
probably not even letterboxed.
Right. Yeah. And knowing that, this new special edition, there were some changes and there were some up-resing and different things like that. So I was kind of excited to see what was new, because not only was it re-released, but there were new scenes added, new creatures, and new effects. So it was probably one of the coolest birthdays that I had when
That
I was a kid.
yes. Now, did what was your reaction to the changes? Because when I saw it, they bumped me only because I had seen the original presentation of Star Wars so many
Hmm.
times that I knew it beat for beat for beat, like shot,
Hmm.
like I knew the rhythm of it, and this changed the
Right.
rhythm of it a little bit. Not necessarily for the negative, it's just it was different to me. Did you kind of find that, or
Yeah, a little bit. I think, there were certain scenes that maybe extended it to the not necessarily purposeful space that I think,
yep,
maybe it was intended for. Specifically like Return of the Jedi. We had this extension of a song in Jabba's palace
that's
that
right.
probably
Yes.
was not necessarily needed. But I do feel like there were some things in the cleaning up that might have been added that I actually really enjoyed. I think, when you first see Luke and Obi-Wan, um, you know, skiffing into Mos Eisley,
Yep.
and they add a couple little creatures, and there's another droid who kind of like hits something, and Aronto kind of like pulls back. I just thought that was cool. It was there were more creatures, and it was just adding to the atmosphere and how kind of grungy and out of control Mos Eisley was.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but I'm with people. Hot shot first. It
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
that's right. Yes.
it adds to his character, and when that was changed, that kind of took things a little bit away.
Yeah.
But some of the cleaning up, like with Empire Strikes Back, when they cleaned up some of the snow speeder
Yes.
visual effects, that definitely for me was an improvement.
Now, I had, I don't know, 16 years to wait between movies. You had what feels like, if you count the VHS viewing of it, maybe 6 years.
Yeah. Hmm.
What was it? You're a little bit older when the prequel trilogy comes out. And so I don't want to phrase this the wrong way. You're a newer fan to the franchise, becoming a fan in the mid 90s.
Right.
How did that affect your anticipation for the prequel trilogy?
I think it just amped up my anticipation. And I think because, there was a new series of action figures, and we had just had the re-releases, and the marketing efforts for Phantom Menace were just enormous, that for me as a kid and growing up, that just felt like, oh, Star Wars is building. And I know, and I've talked with some of my other friends, who, like you, had to wait much longer between films, and really the only thing you had was Star Tours. So,
Yes.
or your action figures from the 70s and 80s, and you creating your own Star Wars, right? So yeah, to you it was kind of like, oh, it's back. Whereas for me, yeah, it felt like it was building, and my anticipation was extremely high. I think when Phantom Menace was announced, I was super excited, totally had the hots for Natalie Portman. Had to go to Taco Bell, KFC, and Pizza Hut to get all of the Phantom Menace cups
Yep.
and all the little toys and the Happy Meals and things like that. It was like, oh my gosh, this is Star Wars. This is, we're building to something even cooler.
Now, do you still have any of those cups or the toys from Taco Bell?
I do.
Nice.
The one that I definitely did not want to get rid of was the R2D2. R2 has always had a special place in my heart because that was one of the first action figures that I ever got, was actually a small little R2D2. The Darth Maul cup was awesome. And then there was one toy, I think it was from Taco Bell, that was Amidala's Naboo ship, and it
Yes.
like levitated.
Yes. Yes.
That was cool. I thought that was just so awesome.
It's a really amazing some of the marketing toys they had back then.
Yeah.
And going on that hunt for these items was always a huge part of it. Do you enjoy the hunt? Like, are you still someone who collects action figures or, other Star Wars items?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, my household has grown now that it's not just a single room, but I also have to keep the collection down as much as I can too. But so I there's occasional special things
Yeah.
that I still collect. But I do remember, like when I was a kid, the hunt for certain action figures was intense. I remember when the new Yoda action figure came out for the first time back in the mid '90s. He was like, there was rumors that there was fewer of them,
Yep.
and you had to really find them. And I ended up, my friend's mom found one in a mall in Victorville, and we drove. And back then, I think it was like a good 2 hours. We drove all the way to Victorville just to pick up the Yoda action figure, and they only had one left.
Oh no.
But you felt so, so much like a
Accomplished.
champion that you got it. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so there are a few things that are still like that today. I still collect all of the Star Wars Hallmark keepsake ornaments. So our
Oh,
Christmas
that's
tree is
cute.
all Star Wars.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I have a special collection of Funko Pops that is very
Oh, yeah.
specific in terms of they are all the Chewbacca's, or I do have another Wookiee. I have a Black Chrysanthemum that's the flocked versions. Um, they're just so cool.
Oh, nice. Now, are you a bigger fan of the PT than the OT, or do you consider them equal in your head?
To an extent, yes. And I think as much as there are problems with the PT in terms of, a little bit of the storytelling, a little bit of the effects, and I think some of the acting is part of that with, they didn't have a lot to go off of. It's got a very special place in my heart. And I think one of the biggest parts about that too was the addition of the Clone Wars. And
Yeah.
like understanding that there's a pretty big gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and that Anakin didn't just snap.
Yeah.
There was a gradual leading to this darkness that overwhelmed not only the galaxy, but this man who had so much pain. And I think the funny thing is that a lot of people think, because of, if they're just watching the films, that, oh, Anakin was only upset because of Padme and that was the only thing. No, like Padme is a definite piece of it, and a very important piece. But
Yeah.
with what we've learned through the Clone Wars, Ahsoka is also a massive, massive piece of his downfall because of what happened to her, and his feeling and faith in what the Jedi Order had done to her was probably a good part of his downfall, in my opinion.
What is one of your favorite Clone Wars storylines, story arcs, or what is it about the Clone Wars that really attracts you? And what is one of your favorite storylines?
So a couple things about Clone Wars that's really intriguing is not only does it fill in gaps and it kind of gives us a little bit of the scope of this gigantic galactic war that was happening, but it's also very personal. And you get to know not only Jedi, but clones, but you get to see both sides of the story as well. One of my favorite stories is, I can't remember the titles of it, but essentially, I think it's Heroes on Both Sides. I think that's what it is. And the idea that, we actually get to see a little bit from the separatist point of view. And not everybody wants to just go against the Republic, but there are certain things about them wanting to be free and wanting to be able to govern themselves. And, part of that is also heroic. But I think my favorite storyline, which is actually a more recent one, is the Siege of Mandalore. I think that story arc with those 4 episodes, just it could be a movie in and of itself. And the animation is just so beautiful, and seeing the depth behind Ahsoka coming back, and then having to take on this extra mission, and then part of them interspersing the animation with events that happen in Revenge of the Sith, which I love as well. It
Yep.
just it pulls it all together in a beautiful way that only Dave Filoni could do.
It 100% feels like a theatrical cut up into 4 parts for television.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it really is a spectacular storyline with a lot of kind of like hints to what's going to happen in the future in Revenge of the Sith. And it's a very fitting kind of finale to the series.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great way to pull it forward and end it where it needed to end, which is what we all knew, that Revenge of the Sith was the end of the
Yes.
Clone Wars, and it was the beginning of the Empire. So it had to go there somehow.
Yeah, it's
So
inevitable.
it was a great, yeah, exactly.
Uh,
But now they're even continuing the story with like Bad Batch and like what
Yes.
happens right after Order 66. And, you know, we got another incredible series with Rebels, you know, seeing leading up to the original trilogy.
Yeah, it is masterfully filling in all these elements and adding to the mythology of Star
Oh, yeah.
Wars. You know, both
Absolutely.
Clone Wars and Rebels do that. What I kind of find interesting about Bad Batch is that I didn't realize I wanted to know what happened to all the clones between Order 66 and A New Hope. And
Yeah.
it is that they keyed in on that story, I think, is a fascinating way of telling the story of the Bad Batch as well.
Yeah, I think this last season, season 2, was really unique in telling that story and how they started decommissioning the clones and how they started bringing in, you know, recruits to become stormtroopers, and how the Empire really kind of started truly like switching its gears to being more authoritarian versus the Republic that we all loved
Yes.
for peace in the galaxy, right? And there's one episode this past season that was just incredible. I guess it was a little bit of an arc, you know, when one of the clones, you know, asked for help from a senator. And, you know, it started becoming a larger issue for essentially veterans' rights, right? And
Yes.
it was really interesting and really cool that you can tell crazy big stories like that about stuff that happens in real life too, through animation.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I'm appreciating about your point of view right now is you don't look at the stories in chunks like I do. Because time has separated these in my head in the sense that there's the original trilogy, there's the prequel trilogy, then the Clone Wars, I believe, premiered in 2008, so there's the Clone Wars. But you seem to have a much more condensed vision of all the movies and television shows that becomes one giant story arc. Do you think that's true?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, and I think I don't know when that clicked, and I don't know when that happened, but I think that's absolutely true for me. I think about Star Wars as the galaxy far, far away. And you know, I can also, you know, look at things from the original trilogy did so many incredible things for storytelling and for movie making, and, you know, having special effects. I can totally appreciate all of the incredible things that certain eras of Star Wars have done. But when I look at Star Wars, for me, it's about the story. It's about the larger episodic tale of this gigantic space opera.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, the Skywalker saga is the crux of it all. And I'm kind of excited to see where we go from here now that the Skywalker saga is done. I do read, actually more listen to, you know, some of the High Republic stuff. So getting a little bit ahead of what we know. But it is, to me, one big story. And it can be broken out into chunks, and it can be different eras of storytelling. But I look at it from the timeline. I look at it from this is when, you know, Anakin was born, and this is when Emperor Palpatine finally took power. And
I think I'm a little bit jealous because you got to experience original trilogy and prequel trilogy kind of in your childhood, where you could really enjoy it in one long series. Unfortunately, I fell to the curse of wanting the prequel trilogy to be something that it wasn't, which was maybe a rehash of Star Wars, maybe more of the same, as opposed to, I think, what George Lucas did with the prequel trilogy that I'm only kind of now coming to learn is that he did something new at every turn.
Right.
Do you think the prequel trilogy really expanded your vision of the Star Wars universe from what the original trilogy kind of gave you at first?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you make a good point with every turn was something new. And I think what the prequel trilogy did was expand upon the story in a sense that, yes, there was hints because we got names like Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi from the original trilogy. But really, the entire prequel trilogy stems off of one line that Obi-Wan says in A New Hope, right? Is that I fought with your father in the Clone Wars. There's a time, so I think what George wanted to do was not necessarily use the same characters and go into the same story, but like, let's tell a new part of the galaxy and what could have been something completely different. And although we see a lot of different things, all new ships, we get all new planets, we get whole new political storylines, it still seems to fit within this larger canon of good versus evil.
Yeah.
The Force being an all-encompassing thing that binds the galaxy together.
Yeah. Now, what do you think in Star Wars? How do you continue to build upon the fans, and not just the ones who already love it, but how do you get new ones, do you think?
I think the great thing about Star Wars is that it's an expanding universe. It's not just the Skywalker saga is done. It is something that will continue to build. And I think as long as you have the right storytellers behind it and you have the right effort that's being put into harnessing the franchise in the right way, whether it's through toys, whether it's through apparel, whether it's through theme park, experiences like Galaxy's Edge, or hopefully some new upcoming films or the Disney Plus series, like as long as those things are being handled in the right way, thinking about it from a storytelling point of view, thinking about it from wanting to make sure that it lies within the fandom, there will be a pinpoint for new fans to come in. If it's a toy, kids come in very easily that way. I think the animation has done a really great job of being able to bring in kids. I think things like Galaxy's Edge or our fandom of apparel and wearing our favorite Star Wars shirt or having a really cool mug, that keeps all of us alive as well. Like when it comes to the fandom, because you can show your support, you can be there. And I think one of the big things is that Star Wars is no longer just a nerdy thing like it is. It's in the zeitgeist. It's it's a big thing. So it's, people can actually, be proud of being a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, it's very true. Now, from the prequel trilogy to the sequel trilogy, there was a large swath of time. And you did have Clone Wars and then Rebels leading up to it, I believe. How did you prepare for the premiere of The Force Awakens?
So I was in high anticipation again. And I think because we had Rebels and Rebels was so good, it is one of my favorite series. Yeah. I also have a Rebels tattoo.
What is it of? Is it Chopper?
It's of the Ghost. No, Chopper's yet to come. But the Ghost, it's
the spaceship in Rebels, yes.
Yeah. So my wife and I had, been dating and I gotta remember if we were already married at that point, but we were watching Rebels together and building her fandom kind of back from her disappointment with some of the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
So there was a high anticipation for a new Star Wars movie. And at this point, we were still going to see like midnight screenings, so we would go to the different theaters that were, we saw the last Harry Potter movie at midnight and different things like that. And so we were like, okay, we're going to do a midnight screening of Force Awakens and we're going to get all of our friends together and we're gonna, have dinner first, and it's gonna be good, and we're gonna, have a blast. It's gonna be Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we all went in and watched the movie, and some of us were still super excited, but kind of like, okay, all right, maybe this is okay. I actually had a really good time. I think, The Force Awakens did a really amazing job of blending characters that we knew,
Yep.
like Han, and introducing new and exciting characters with potential, like Rey and Finn and Poe.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a little bit of a retelling of A New Hope, it's just bigger,
Yeah.
but it also kind of gave that sense of familiarity,
Yeah.
but something new. So I was excited for what was to come, and I felt like there was a unique opportunity to, again, like the prequel trilogy, to start telling another part of the story in a different part of the galaxy. Like, there were a lot of unanswered questions after The Force Awakens. Like, where did
Yeah.
the First Order come from? What's up with Rey's parentage? All these different things that we eventually got answers to, but maybe not in the best ways. But they were questions that, very, very much like J.J. Abrams likes to do, he likes to entice people to want more.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was enticed. But then, being an avid follower of everything Star Wars, you started to kind of see some of the cracks starting to happen, and different things were happening with Solo. And then all of a sudden, there was a changing of the guard in terms of the films. And, everybody was praising Ryan Johnson and figuring out what that could be. But there was still some talk that it could be divisive. So it just felt like a little bit of the buzz around what was happening in Star Wars was not as positive as the energy that I was trying to feel, and the excitement that, I think what was wanting to be. Rogue One was incredible. It is one of the best Star Wars movies ever created.
Yeah. And oddly, not a single lightsaber, right?
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait, I guess at the end, Vader takes out his lightsaber,
Yep.
which is technically
Always
was an add-on.
Yeah. But even then, there was a little bit of kind of stuff going on, with Rogue One, and they had to reshoot a bunch of the film. And so some of that kind of negativity is harsh, but, some of the not so positive buzz around what was going on with Star Wars was kind of hindering a little bit of it. And I think it started making the fandom a little bit divisive already. And I think people started picking sides and finding different places. And I know this is what I love about this podcast, is it's your love of Star Wars. Like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. Thank you.
So I think there's good and bad, but it's also Star Wars. So there's going to be parts that are meaningful for everyone.
That's true. Now, do you think there is space within the sequel trilogy era to build out the story like the Clone Wars did for the prequel trilogy?
I think there's a small amount of space. Unfortunately, the sequel trilogy timeline is much tighter than the original trilogy was, and the space in between prequel trilogy and even the prequel trilogy, there's like several decades, span over that entire 3-film arc. But the sequel trilogy has so little time to kind of show that. I think we are under the impression that there was more time between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, because we saw an evolution between, Rey's training and a little bit of the relationship with Poe and Finn and everybody together. But outside of that, it's really hard to understand if there's any room for additional storytelling. And I think maybe that's why the storytelling that's currently happening with The Mandalorian is the time in between Return of the Jedi and what maybe leads to the First Order.
Yes.
Before that. So if anything, that is kind of the time that we could get.
Which I'm glad for. We're getting a lot of. I think it's one of the most fascinating eras because you can have people like Han, Leia, and Luke show up, but also there's so much more to explore that can tie into the greatest story of the Emperor's return or the rise of the First Order. I also think they're doing a lot of stuff with the faults of the New Republic. Like, it is a very bureaucratic, heavy government, and we're starting to see that.
Yeah, and I the funny thing is Jen and I are always talking a little bit about like, oh well, Mon Mothma sucks, and like she didn't do enough for the rebellion, and different things that could have really led to a better result for the Republic.
Yeah.
But part of that's also what kind of affected, I guess, how the First Order arose, right? Like, and we saw this in not only in The Mandalorian, but starting into a little bit of Andor. We're gonna really start thinking about how we're gonna get a few things going, and I think in this latest season of The Mandalorian, seeing some of the other scenes that weren't necessarily on Mandalore or anything like that, but we saw Coruscant, and we heard the line of the fleet has been disbanded, and any of us that read any of the books or the comics know, oh well, Mon Mothma is the one who, as Chancellor, decided that she was going to try to be a peaceful galaxy and no military, which eventually became the problem. So it is really cool to see that some of that is actually paying off in some of the storytelling with the Disney Plus series, but in a really almost serious and darker political undertone way.
Yeah, there is a lot of dark political undertones within the rebellion, the beginnings of the rebellions in Andor, within the New Republic of Mandalorian. It's kind of interesting that it's almost like this unconscious thing of, what, government just doesn't work. It doesn't matter if you're fascist or democratic. It just doesn't work. That's dark.
I mean, yeah, just a little bit. But I mean, I think the whole point is that we have to all kind of work together and try to do better.
I think you're right. I think that's really good. You win the podcast. We're done.
All right. Yeah, perfect.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about with, as we were talking about Last Jedi and leading up to it, something that I've been kind of wrestling with is this idea of speculation, and within myself, when I speculate too much, I build up expectations, and when those expectations aren't met, I get disappointed, whether it's like this is going to happen, or why is going to happen, and the movie's not what I expect it to be. So it takes me a bit to kind of come around to seeing the movie again to understand what the movie is trying to be. As a fan, are you someone who likes to dive deep into the speculation and rumors online, or are you someone who's more hands off and is just maybe the marketing, or are you one of those people? Are you one of those people? Are you someone who avoids all marketing altogether, if possible?
No. So I try to, be excited about Star Wars as much as I possibly can. So any kind of marketing, any kind of, trailers or stuff like that, I soak it in. I pull it all in because it's just more Star Wars. To your point, understanding the disappointment of anticipation on something that you were really hoping for, or you heard a rumor that something might happen or a character might show up. I understand that pain, not only from a Star Wars perspective, but also being behind the scenes on a lot of things with Marvel and seeing a lot of people coming up with all sorts of different crazy theories, and we're like, no, that's not gonna happen. I try to stay away as much as I possibly can from theories, from rumors, from anything that doesn't necessarily have kind of an official link to it. Just for that reason. I don't want to be disappointed, but also I want to be able to take in Star Wars the way it's being created. And I want to be able to understand the story the way it's being presented. And if I lean too much into a rumor or, think of a theory too deeply, that might not necessarily be something that is on par with how some of the stories are being told, it just doesn't click in my head. And I don't want to pay attention to that kind of stuff. However, there are some theories out there that are kind of fun to just entertain, whether or not certain characters will show up, that's always fun. And there's always dreams, right? There's always like, and I think with Mandalorian in season 2, we got a little bit of that, like seeing Luke come back and seeing Luke meet Ahsoka and, those kinds of things. And now it's kind of like, oh, like what if Leia meets Ahsoka, and what if, so it's almost the what ifs versus the, oh, I think this is going to happen. There's always the fun hopes and dreams on those types of things.
One of the things I realized, this is ridiculous. I talk about it in a little bit in the show I put out today. I'm so excited for Ahsoka because of Rebels, because Rebels is really up there for me as far as Star Wars content.
Same.
And a lot of times when I'm looking at trailers, marketing trailers, having worked in the promo world and having been a fan of trailers all my life, I look at what they don't show you as well. And one of the things I notice is not all the Rebels characters are in the same scene. There's not really a scene where you have all of them together, at least 3 of them together, which is kind of a money shot.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ezra being on a phone call is a little bit of a... well, I say phone call, but he's the
hologram.
Yeah, a hologram. Ezra is a little bit of a clue that maybe he's not fully in this. And then I realized, well, you know what? It could be that each of the characters have an episode. You have your episode where Ahsoka deals with Hera. You have an episode where she deals with Sabine. You have an episode where she deals with Chopper. And it could all, be leading to something, but it made me stop and go, oh, I need to think, I need to curb that so that I don't watch, get to season 4 or not season 4, episode 4 and be like, why are they not in the same room together? What is going on?
What happened? Yeah.
What happened?
No, it's totally. It's one of those things where I because we love Rebels so much, because there's so much news around this, and the ones who love Rebels are the ones who are like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for Ahsoka because we're gonna see Sabine and they've cast Thrawn and we're gonna see all these really cool characters at least on screen. Hera, being one of the greatest pilots in the galaxy. It's one of those things that we can't help but be excited about it. And I totally agree with you. Like, okay, how do I not say, well, why is Sabine not getting on the Ghost and spray painting something, with Hera? Or, the only 2 that we truly see together is obviously Ahsoka and Sabine, because she goes to get her on Lothal. But, it would be really cool to see them all together. And now that we saw Zeb, and even the fact that Chopper debuted in Rogue One was kind of that first Rebels is real, it's part of the universe. Was just it would be so cool to see them all together.
It would be. And now that we're talking
minus
about
Kanan, obviously.
Yeah.
May the Force be with him.
So getting away from the philosophy and going back to more Star Wars of what we love, what is your favorite Star Wars memory?
I have a lot of really good ones, but one of the coolest things that is Star Wars for me, actually there's 2 that I'll talk about. One is, and you mentioned it at the top, is my wedding. We had stormtroopers, we had an R2-D2. Jen and I both, had Star Wars moments in our vows, and it was my mom did paper lanterns that were painted like planets from Star Wars. There was a Hoth, and it was bringing Star Wars to light into something that I love and with someone I love was just so amazing.
Yes.
But then another event is actually something that my wife did for me was my 30th birthday. It was a full-on Star Wars party. And it was a requirement. If you were going to attend, you had to cosplay.
Oh, nice.
Wore full stormtrooper armor that, was loaned from one of my friends in the 501st. And everybody showed up. I had a ton of people, and I had everybody dressed from Jawas. We had like 6 different Princess Leias. We had, one of our.
Were they a
friends.
variety of Princess Leia's, like A New Hope, Hoth,
We
Bespin?
did have one Bespin Leia and one Endor Forest Leia, but pretty much everybody else was Princess Leia. So, and my parents dressed like Jawas, and our best friend was Emperor Palpatine. We had a couple Chewbacca's. Like, it was awesome. And my wife planned out all these incredible like Star Wars themed games, and all of our food and beverages were all themed. And we had A New Hope playing on in the background. And actually, it was, I think, because you're obviously very well familiar with Mr. John Ford, I think it was his son's first time seeing Star Wars at my 30th birthday.
Oh, wow.
I think that was right. You might have to check with him on accuracy.
Yes.
But it was definitely one of the coolest parties. And I don't know that next year for my 40th could be topped. It was amazing.
Well, I was just thinking, it's like your 50th, you got to do something.
Yeah.
Go big.
I'm going to actually get in an X-Wing and take down the Death Star. Yeah.
Nice. Now, what do you think is the best way to introduce the movies to someone new? That
is an amazing question. And we are kind of talking about that a lot in our household and with my brother, because my brother and sister-in-law now have a 4-year-old and soon to be 3-year-old. And we want to introduce them to Star Wars. And my brother, luckily, has held off on showing them the movies because they want Jen and I to be a part of that when that's introduced. But they are showing them a little bit of the new animated content with like Young Jedi Adventures. Yep. They're getting a little bit of, some of the online short form content that was kind of like the almost anime style, like retelling of Star Wars.
Oh, yes.
And my niece already knows who Ahsoka is, already knows that it's Jen's favorite character. And,
I don't know.
It's great when
if you know Jen, you can't know that.
Right. Exactly. So, it's great that they're kind of starting to be introduced, but they haven't fully been introduced to the movies. So I think the way I was always introduced, and I think we've all kind of felt the same way, is you got to start with the original trilogy, and you have to give them that hope of what the galaxy meant in A New Hope and understand where all of these characters came from. And then, much like I think the way George was trying to tell it was with the prequel trilogy, go back and get a better understanding of how we got here and how the galaxy went from this grand republic to this empire taking over and kind of a galaxy in rebellion against, the emperor. So I think I would stay true in kind of the release order.
Yeah. It naturally introduces everything you need to know in the way you need to know it.
Right. Exactly. It all comes back to the way stories are told.
Yes, it does. And off of that, what are the top 3 elements that make Star Wars to you?
Ooh, I think one of the biggest things is the true idea of a force behind everything. A lot of science fiction, a lot of other stories can tell about space battles and tell about technology and all sorts of crazy weird things. But Star Wars is really the only one that has the Force and has this deeper, mystical, and almost religious like undertone that truly kind of does, bind the galaxy together, but also becomes the source of what certain characters are driven from. So I would say the Force, and not just, may the Force be with you, but the deeper meaning of the Force is inherent. The second, I think, would be the larger tone of an expanded and wide universe. I think a lot of stories kind of begin and end, and a lot of franchises have kind of this inciting incident, and it kind of builds from there. But with Star Wars, there's an expansion that can always tell more stories. And as we know with some of the announcements recently, like, we're going to go back thousands of years beyond what we already know and learn where the Jedi came from. And we're going to learn, we've already been learning about the High Republic, and we're going to now also get a little bit farther, with a new Rey film, on where do the Jedi go from there. So there's always room to expand the universe. And then I think the other major difference with Star Wars is the love of imagination. And I think whether it's from George imagining this incredible universe, or the filmmakers imagining how they're going to make this special effect work, or Luke imagining what it's like to be off of a desert planet and in space, there's something inherent about loving the hope and imagination of doing something impossible. And I think you can take that across a lot of characters, whether it was Anakin always, wanting to do more and be more and be the best and build, and eventually that was his downfall. But everything from even Rey wanting to imagine understanding herself and her family, and becoming part of this larger story. I think that's really great about Star Wars.
That is really great. I love the idea, what you were saying about how there's always room for expansion with telling the story, because I do look at the Star Wars universe as a genre. It's kind of a sci-fi fantasy, but as a universe, it's anything you kind of want it to be. And I always ask this, is there a genre that you haven't seen in the Star Wars universe, much like Mandalorian's a Western? Is there a genre you would like to see, whether it's horror or musical comedy, romantic comedy? I always go to those extremes.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is we've started seeing some horror, which is awesome.
Yes.
Not only in The Mandalorian, we got some really cool episodes in season 2, but we're seeing horror in some of the Star Wars comics with, some of the Tales of the Dark Side and different things like that.
Even Clone Wars had.
Right. Yeah. Well, Clone Wars gave us, one of the coolest fun genres of monster films, right? With the Gila monster and almost a Godzilla like. So we got a little bit of that, and Westerns. I think, musical is probably the only one we haven't really seen in Star Wars, but I don't know that we need musical. Unless it's, some grand opera that's being told in one of this, in one of the
like a story within a story.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
I guess there we got a little bit of a musical episode on the newest anime series that's on Disney Plus. There was the one where
Visions.
Yeah, Visions, where there was an episode where there was a rock band that was playing for Jabba, and everybody at the Boonta Eve race.
Yes.
The holiday special is a musical. Hello.
That's true. A holiday special is a musical. True.
Now we have to sit with that for a little bit. Thanks, Jen.
All right. Well, happy Life Day, everyone.
Yes. The other one is, there have been musical numbers within the world, even in the cantina where it was just a jazz scene, or Jabba's, Cy Snoodles in the Max Rebo band, and whatever the new version of that in the special edition was. So there's a little bit of musical numbers in there.
Yeah.
What I'm going to take Ahsoka out and ask you this. Ahsoka aside, of all the things announced for Star Wars right now, what are you looking forward to the most?
Everything. Can I say that? Can I say everything?
Yeah.
Interestingly, I'm actually really excited to see what James Mangold could bring to the Dawn of the Jedi, to taking an almost like biblical approach to like technology, even not really fully existing would be amazing. But
Yeah.
it's a part of the galaxy we haven't seen yet. It's something new and a new way to tell the story. And that kind of excites me a lot. I am excited for Dave Filoni's film because it's kind of a culmination of everything that's been happening with The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka. I know you said not to think about Ahsoka, but
Well, it's just the series coming up because
yeah.
I know for me, if someone asks me, I'm just like Ahsoka.
Yeah. Oh, well, and luckily we get it fairly soon. So
Yeah.
and I think, there's, a lot of speculation too. Like, are we going to see some cool stuff with the Acolyte? And are we, how is the High Republic really going to kind of feel?
Now, my final question for you. You go to Skywalker Ranch, and there at the gates, George Lucas greets you. What do you say to him?
Thank you. Not only for, creating this incredible world and universe that we have all loved and lived in and imagined in and hoped for more, but also thank you for inviting me to Skywalker Ranch. I think it's definitely one of those, everybody always says, oh, well, if you could meet anybody, who would it be? If you could have dinner with anybody. And you always say, oh, well, some historical figure. And for a long time, I said George Lucas, just because he was just so inspirational on everything with Star Wars. But I don't even know. Like, I don't, other than thank you, I don't know what I would say to him. I don't know if I would want to truly interact with him, because he just built this entire thing that created such a legacy that continues on, that I wouldn't look like a complete idiot just spewing out how much I love Star Wars to him, and he probably just yeah, okay, thanks, all right. So I don't know, other than thank you.
That's a pretty damn good George Lucas impersonation, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Ryan, thank you so much for telling me what Star Wars means to you. It's been really enlightening. I love your point of view of story being the kind of backbone of everything. Like, it should all fall out of story. I absolutely agree with you. Where can people find you on the socials?
I have all of the typical socials with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I believe I'm at R Gallego 72511, which was my 501st number, or at
Are
Jedi
you a member
Master.
of the 501st?
I was at one point. But the thing with the 501st is that every year you have to do a certain amount of volunteer hours in order to maintain your membership.
Evil.
I know, right? But it's completely free. It's not like I paid dues or anything like that.
No.
And ultimately, the 501st is all for charity. It's all for a good cause. It's all such an incredible fandom that has been put together that brings about joy for not only kids, for people. That's how we got stormtroopers at our wedding. But
that's how they got stormtroopers on Mandalorian.
Yeah.
A lot of the extras were the 501st.
Mm-hmm. So it's an incredible organization. But if you're going to be a part of it, you have to participate. And unfortunately, I was going through a period of transition with certain things at work, and I just didn't have a lot of free time. So maybe one day I'll try to get back in. But I lost my card.
Well, that's amazing.
But at Jedi Master Rin 7 as well is one of my other handles.
Excellent. All that information will be in the podcast notes as well. And Ryan, again, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I love talking Star Wars. My wife loves talking Star Wars. Anyone who we can just sit and just fan with is incredible. So thanks, Dave.
So that's what Star Wars means to Ryan. You can find him on most social sites at Master Rin, and all of his links are in the podcast notes as well. If you had a Star Wars themed party, what is your must-have character or decoration? What kind of Star Wars tattoo do you have, or do you want to have? And have you ever been part of the 501st? Get in on the conversation on Twitter or Instagram at Star Wars Mean to You. That's at Star Wars Mean, the number 2 and the letter U. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. If you're liking the show, please give us a 5-star rating and review. And remember, the Force will be with you, always. Hi, this is Dave, and before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners, and that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 and the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.